Welcome to my Ogre tutorial series. This episode covers heavy tracked units. First up, forest, streams, and ridges. So we've got a couple examples here. Got a heavy tank, super heavy, and a Mark 1 Ogre. So if we look at the ridges that are here, if the heavy tank is going to move, it can't cross the ridge at all. It has to go around. So trying to get here, it's going around. If we try to do the same thing for an ogre, it doesn't care, drives right over it. Same thing for a super heavy, drives right over it. If we look at streams and forests, none of them care about these at all, no effect. Straight through, this heavy tank driving through the forest, straight through, doesn't care at all. And streams, straight through. So heavy tracked vehicles don't really care about these terrain types at all. And the only difference is the heavy tanks get stopped by ridges. Swamp and rubble. Swamp is one of the most dangerous terrains in the game for heavy tracked vehicles because they have the potential to get stuck. And what that means is it costs 2 movement points to enter, but when they enter, they have to do a die roll. On a 1 or 2, they become stuck, which means they cannot move for the rest of the game. This isn't just a can't move for a turn thing. This is, if they get stuck, they are not going to move until the game is over. So you have to be very aware of that. So just to give you some examples here, we've got some swamp sections here. When you drive into it, you get the same red that you get from other terrain types to tell you that something bad is going to happen. So the super heavy driving in does his die roll, got a 3, got lucky. Now you'll notice that he has 2 more movement that he should be able to do, but his movement's disabled for the rest of the turn after driving into the swamp. He's not stuck because he rolled a 3, but he can't move anymore for this turn. And the same thing for the heavy. If we drive it in, got a 6, we're okay, but the other 2 movement that he might have had can't do it. So he spent 2, the last one can't get back out. Ogre, same thing. Spends 2 to go in, but can't spend his 3rd to get out. But all 3 of these guys rolled better than a 1 or 2, so they're not stuck. And that's the key difference here. So next turn, they'll be able to try to recover and continue moving. Now, rubble, on the other hand, rubble is identical for heavy tanks. So driving in, rolled a 1. So he is stuck. So he is never going to move again through the rest of the game. Now, this is very important. It's a bug that currently exists in the game. Ogres and super heavies, if you look at the stats for the rubble, you'll see that heavy track units, it's 1 movement point for an ogre for a super heavy, but they have no chance of being disabled or stuck. It's just like clear terrain for them. But this is where the bug comes in. The game isn't doing this right. So if I take an ogre and I drive it into rubble, it says that it's potentially going to get disabled. You drive in, got a 5, we're okay. But it gets it half right. It doesn't stop its movement for the turn. So it can continue moving, but you continue to run the risk of being disabled. So that's a bug in the game that you need to be aware of. The rule is this should be clear terrain for super heavies and ogres, but it's currently not being played that way. But they can continue to move through it. So it's half right, but unfortunately the most dangerous part of this is actually the bug. So just be aware of that when you're playing, and hopefully this will be something they'll fix later on in an update in the game. And just so you can see what stuck looks like, remember, this heavy tank is currently stuck. So we'll end our movement phase, go to a firing phase. We've got the enemy movement, fire. So now it's our movement phase again. This guy is still stuck, and he's going to be stuck for the rest of the game. So that's what happens when you get stuck in a swamp or in rubble. Next up, towns. Towns cost 2 movement points to enter, and defense is doubled. And ogre treads get an additional defensive bonus, where normally it's a 5 or 6 to hit. In towns, you have to get a 6 to hit them. So if we look at moving in, cost 2 movement points to enter. So an ogre moving in, 1, 2, 3 to move in. Super heavy, same thing. 1, 2, 3. And a heavy tank, 1, 2, 3. So it costs 2, and he's got 1 left. Can continue through. Now for the defensive part of this, if we're attacking heavy tracked vehicles, you'll notice that it shows that it has a treads defense boost. Alright, so when you're attacking treads on an ogre in a town, normally you need a 5 or 6 to hit them. But because of the defensive bonus, when you try to attack the treads, you need a 6 or better to hit. So it makes something that is already hard to hit even harder. Now, some of the other vehicles that we're dealing with, the super heavy and the heavy tank, those are more traditional armor units, but they also get a defensive bonus in the towns. Their defense strength is doubled. So normally your heavy tank has a defensive value of 3, but you can see here that its defense is doubled, so it has an effective defense of 6, which is really hard to hit. The super heavy, however, has a base defense of 5, which means in a town it's doubled and has a defense of 10. So when you're attacking the super heavy in a town, and the only thing you've got is a heavy tank that has an attack strength of 4, it's a no effect, because that 4 against its 10 isn't even strong enough to get a 1 to 2 attack. So you've got to bring a lot more firepower to try to take something out in the town. And especially for the super heavy, that's really difficult to do. Now it's time to talk about water. All right, water is kind of an interesting special case. Heavy tank can't cross it, but ogres and super heavies can drive into water. It costs them 2 movement points to enter, and they're considered submerged. Because they're submerged, they can't attack, and they can't be attacked by anything other than a howitzer, a mobile howitzer, or ogre missiles. And those are at half strength. So if we look at Mark 1 here, driving in, it's got 3 movement points. So 1, 2, 3 can drive through the water and come across. Super Heavy is the same thing. Can drive in, cost 2, but you'll notice that he can't go into other water because that would be 4, and he can't do that. But he can drive his third movement point to come out. So that's part of the reason why I've got the Mark IV Ogre here, because this guy's a special case. The Mark IV is one of the fastest ogres that's available, and it has 4 movement points to start. So it's actually capable of spending 2 movement points to drive into 1 water hex, and then spending 2 more to drive into a second water hex. Nothing else in the game is capable of doing that. The heavy tank, compared to the ogres, like we were saying before, can't drive into water, but it can use the bridges to go across the water. There are a couple interesting defensive qualities about water with ogres. So these guys up here, you've got an ogre and a super heavy that are both submerged. But if we try to attack these, so the ogre, we're going to try to attack a component. You'll notice that the only thing that shows up are mobile howitzer and the howitzer. The mobile howitzer trying to attack normally has an attack strength of 6, but you can see the status effect listed on the card here that says target submerged. What that means is that 6 gets halved into a 3. So instead of a 6 to 4, we have a 3 to 4. And the same thing applies to the super heavy. So attack strength of 6 gets reduced to a 3. And by comparison, we've got a heavy tank here that's in range, but it's not eligible to attack because the target's submerged. And the only thing, again, that can hit a submerged target is Marines during an overrun, howitzers, mobile howitzers, or ogre missiles. And the howitzers and ogre missiles are at half strength. Now a quick look at roads. Heavy tracked vehicles get a road bonus like all the other units in the game, and it's the same for all 3 types. So super heavy can move 3 hexes per turn, but if it follows the road, it gets the +1 for the movement. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the same thing for an ogre. Can move 3 hexes per turn. 1, 2, 3. And then gets 1 more if he stays on the road. And the heavy tank gets the same road bonus. 1, 2, 3, and then +1. So that's it for heavy tracked units. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure to check out the other videos in my series. Thank you.